I offered Bab 3 different talk topics, and apologies for the regrets I now feel for having ultimately chosen this one. I work for a company called Imagination Technologies. We are a computer chip designer, so we tend to sell to other big computer chip designers, and that's why you probably haven't heard of us. But we are in lots of the devices that you have sitting in your pockets right now. So who am I? I am a mathematician, but I'm pretending to be an engineer who's then pretending to be a manager. I did a PhD in maths maybe about 10 years ago, and I kind of got a bit of a buzz for doing stuff that had never been done before. So for those of you who don't know, a maths PhD involves a lot of sitting in a room with paper and pen, not talking to people. That part's less fun. Being the first person in the world to know something, that's pretty amazing. In fact, there are a lot of mathematicians who go a little bit crazy for it. There are a lot of famous films concerning such mathematicians. So I can see where they come from, though, because the buzz of being the first person in the world to know something is amazing. So I got very excited by this. But I found maths as a PhD, as an academic subject, quite abstract, a little bit too disconnected from the real world for me. So I moved into industry, but I still want to do things that no one has ever done before, and in order to do that, I need to hire and motivate smart people so that I can keep doing that, well, they can keep doing that, so that I can keep doing that, and so on and so on. So Michael and I have the same chess graphics guy. So this is sort of just to give you a bit of an example of what I'm talking about. So I manage a team. It's an applied research team. You can probably infer pretty much what I mean from that just by those two words, but I'm kind of going to give you a few stories about what it means for me and why I think it's a cool way to run a team. So concerning chess, the 8 queens problem. You've got a chessboard, and you've got queens. Queens can move as much as they like horizontally, vertically, or along either diagonal. And the question is, how many queens can you put on a chessboard such that no 2 of them could take each other? So obviously you've got a maximum of 8, because you can't have 2 in any given column or any given row. But the sort of simple question is, can you actually do 8? Because the diagonals might technically make it impossible. And the answer is, yes, you can. And here's the most sort of famous solution. Because it's the prettiest, it sort of looks nice and symmetrical, and I've chosen it for that reason. So why am I telling you about the 8 queens puzzle? Well, when you come into my team, we are a mathematically focused team. We do all of the mathematics for computer chips. So whenever, mostly graphics, whenever your phone is making a picture, pretty picture, mostly for a 3D scene, it's doing thousands, millions, billions of mathematical calculations to work out what's going on. If you've got one of the many beautiful devices that contain chips from my company, then my team did all of that maths. So what happens when you come into my team? Well, you start out not knowing anything, and we give you a training problem. We say, right, here's the 8 queens puzzle. Go and code it into electronics. Go and turn it into an electronic circuit such that if you find nice properties of this electronic circuit, it will give you solutions to the 8 queens problem. And that's actually quite a hard problem. I mean, it's not ridiculous. You probably know all the sort of numbers. You could run this pretty quickly and just check and find them all. But actually, there are only 92 out of about 4.5 billion possible layouts that would work. So why do we like this problem? Well, I gave this to one of my team who joined maybe 4 years ago. And we just had this, and it was really meant to just be an example of, OK, here's something vaguely interesting that you can go and try and code into some electronics. You can learn the ropes. You can learn how to press buttons on the tools that make electronics, and you can get something fun that you understand. But then it came to testing it and making sure that we had the right kind of solution and it all worked properly. And at this point, he came up with a really interesting idea. So he wanted to show that he had correctly written code that was going to identify non-attacking queens answers. So he said, well, I want to check it works. Well, what can I say about it? Well, if I rotate the board by 90 degrees, whatever I had before should still be a solution. If they were non-attacking before, I rotate the board by 90 degrees, they should still be non-attacking. And if I rotate the board by 180, it should be true and 270. And if I mirror it, it should still be true as well. So he came up with a way of reducing the checking problem. Sounds very obvious, but reducing the checking problem down from these 4 billion, well, that there is an 8-fold reduction, 4 rotations and a mirror, down to about 500 million. Quite a big change. It's not very important for this 8 attacking queens problem. It doesn't feel like a very important thing, and indeed, this is a very kind of silly example that we just threw in there to just be here, have some fun with electronics. But it turns out these kind of symmetries appear in everything. If you think about adding 2 numbers, a plus b is the same as b plus a. Multiplication is exactly the same. If you think about sorting numbers, if I want to sort a load of numbers, if I change the order that I put them in, they should still be the same order when they come out. So this solution to how do I make this problem less complicated doesn't just apply to this non-attacking queens problem, which is just our fun training example. It applies to almost everything that my team has ever done. So this one little example looked at through an interesting lens led us to one of the most significant patents that we've ever had, which takes very big, complicated mathematical problems about how do you check electronics and turns them into much, much simpler, much, much reduced problems. So why am I telling you this? If you give interesting problems to clever people, it doesn't matter how trivial the problem starts out, the solution can be interesting. And that's the premise that we start the team with. If you give the right people interesting problems to work on, they will find ways to make them useful. And if you're managing that team, you have to be the person that spots the times when their ideas are useful and spots all the places where their ideas are useful. The guy from my team came up with the solution. I'm very proud to say I noticed the other places that it would apply. So I'm very pleased. I didn't come up with the idea, but I did spot where it could be useful. Okay, so managing people. Smart people doing innovative things, they need interesting things to work on, but they sort of need anything interesting to work on. You can make it work no matter what you get them to work on. How do you keep them working on interesting problems? So concerning people, the sunk cost fallacy. Have people heard of the sunk cost fallacy here? I'm guessing this is sort of reasonably well-known-ish in popular culture. Don't worry, I've got a slide in it. The sunk cost fallacy says, you're likely to keep doing something if you've already put lots of money into it, even if you've got no chance of getting any money back out again, basically. If you've worked on a project for ages and you've thrown $1 million at it, you're more likely to throw another $1 million at it, even if you've only got a chance of getting $500,000 back out again. So it's kind of one of these sort of business things that you learn day one in business school, that you shouldn't throw good money after bad. You shouldn't just keep investing in things just because you feel invested. So here's my counter to that. Money is not the only sunk cost. And the immediate financial costs of canning a project are not the only costs that you lose. Because smart people have invested their time. Smart people investing their time who get a project canned, you haven't just lost the money from that project, you've lost all of the goodwill you built up from having lots of smart people work on interesting things and put their good ideas into it. So don't obviously just throw money after things, but you need to let smart people work on smart things and you need to let them finish. So we've got, on the one hand, give them something, anything to work on. I'm obviously being a little bit over the top there by saying literally anything, but let smart people work on interesting things. On the other hand, if you want to motivate them, they need to see that they're doing something useful. Smart people need to be working on the cutting edge. They need to be doing things that nobody has ever done before. That's what will motivate them. But a lot of research will never see the light of day. All of this sunk cost stuff, people will can projects when they start to see that there's no value in them. It's completely understandable, and in lots of situations it's the right thing to do. But it'll be very demotivating for people who have put lots of really good, innovative effort into something. So you want to give people an application that they can see through to help them focus their effort. It helps them focus what they're going to try and come up with, and it helps give them a motivating goal to finish it. Yes, and you want to try and place some kind of expectation as well. So a lot of research teams, they do a lot of fantastic work, but they have a lot of very bright people who sit in rooms who don't ultimately bring their stuff out into the real world and let it see the light of day. So what is the applied research model as I see it? So my team, it is a research team. We have freedom to research. My team are allowed to go off and investigate pretty much whatever they want, provided it's broadly within the confines of what we do as a company. But they've got some projects that are going on in the background. So a certain percentage of their time is taken up just by doing projects with deadlines, things that need to be done, things that require smart people but aren't necessarily research level projects. There's an expectation that you will use your projects and what we need to do to guide what you're going to research. And there's an encouragement for when you come up with an idea, like in that non-attacking queens problem, that you won't just look at what problem you've solved, you'll look at what problems you could solve with this idea. I'm realizing that I've gone through my slides far quicker than intended, but hopefully this isn't going to cause anybody any problems. I'm just going to pretend this was meant to be a 20-minute slide. Hiring smart people is great. You've all met very smart people. Some of them are really easy to work with. Some of them are brilliant and come up with fantastic ideas, and you would never want to spend a moment of time with them outside of work. I speak as a man with a PhD in maths. If they're going to see their projects through, that doesn't just involve finishing the work. Have you ever had a project where all you had to do was sit quietly, finish off your work, and be done? You had to go and negotiate with people. You had to go and find out what was needed. All of these talks today have been about finding out what the user needs, finding out how you're going to, what I read this as, what is your specification? What are your requirements? What does it mean to be done? People are going to have to negotiate this kind of stuff, and if they don't, you do. If you're the manager, then if somebody can't go and negotiate for themselves, you are the person that has to do it for them. So if 20% of your time has to be taken up looking after somebody, you have to remember that they're being paid 20% more, or well, probably even more than that. Second thing, Google's taken all the good people. Or rather all the obvious people. Very smart people coming from maths, coming from physics, coming from anything, they're going to all apply to Google because they've heard of Google. They're going to apply to Apple. If you're not Google or Apple, you have to do some work to go and recruit smart people. So go and find the people who aren't doing the obvious thing. I'm sure that if you're doing data science, going and finding data scientists makes a lot of sense. Going and finding a physicist might be a little bit more innovative there, you see. In my case, I go and find mathematicians and turn them into electronic engineers. They've never heard of electronic engineering because they're mathematicians and they just like playing with numbers. Basically, when they come out of university, they've heard of finance and they've heard of teaching, and that's pretty much it. These days, maybe machine learning, a little bit machine learning. So we tell them that's what they're doing in interviews and then only switch it at the end. We do have a machine learning division. My team does do some work for the machine learning company. I'm not lying entirely when I say that. But the obvious candidates have all been taken by the obvious places. You need to find the smart people who are not in the obvious places. In my case, that's mathematicians. Train them well. If you want to keep people, if you want to get the best people, you need to be giving them something unique. Part of that is giving them interesting work. Part of that is giving them an opportunity to do things that they wouldn't be able to do elsewhere. I've had a lot of people coming to me from companies where they hired and said, oh yeah, we need a PhD. We need somebody with a PhD. And they had them just pressing buttons for 8 hours a day and not really doing anything that was anything related to what they were hired for at all. You need to give them interesting work, but you need to train them and you need to show them that you have not hired from a conventional source. You've not hired somebody who already knows what they're doing. If you can be a good person at training them, you've now managed to turn somebody who was previously just a standard kind of somebody from some course somewhere into somebody who's perfect for your job. Perfect for your job. Give them stuff to work on that's fun, and cutting edge stuff is fun. I work in an industry, we do the graphics for smartphones, we do the graphics for TVs, we get into games consoles, we do really cool things. We get to work at the moment, we're looking at things like how you map realistic light in game scenes or mobile phone scenes. It's really fascinating stuff. It's really exciting stuff. Get them to work on interesting things. They'll like you for it. And even if you're not the smartest person in the room, I am very, very rarely the smartest person in the room, that if you can be the person who sees the bigger picture, if you can be the person who spots that idea about chess problems and realizes that the answer is not about chess problems, the answer is about everything that you've ever worked on, it doesn't matter that you didn't come up with the idea in the first place. You've probably done more for that idea than the person who came up with it. So I think that that's the entirety of my slides. So you will get to have beers as early as you like. So thank you very much for your time.